The skies of Tarnax 4 burned with the colors of defeat, a swirling blend of deep reds and purples as the once proud VRI forces huddled beneath the remnants of a shattered fleet. It was a scene that none of us, even in our most pessimistic moments, could have ever imagined, a moment that marked the collapse of an empire that had stood unchallenged for centuries. The VARI, the masters of the galaxy's most sophisticated technologies and rulers of countless systems, were forced to bow before a species we had once considered insignificant, humans. It was unthinkable, yet here we stood, as their battle-scarred fleet hung in orbit above our capital, waiting for the formal surrender that would mark the end of an era. We had watched their rise with amusement at first, observing from afar as they struggled through their primitive industrial age, their first forays into space, their discovery of faster-than-light travel. None of it had concerned us. We saw their rapid technological development as merely the clumsy steps of a young species destined to either destroy itself or fade into irrelevance. But we had been wrong. The first encounters between our forces were almost laughable in their simplicity. Our ships, sleek and elegant, danced through the void while their clumsy, metallic vessels sputtered and flared in the darkness. Their weapons were crude, their tactics rudimentary, and we dismantled their initial advances with ease, barely considering them a threat. Yet the humans, unlike any other species we had encountered, possessed a quality that we had not anticipated: a tenacity, a willingness to endure failure after failure, and an almost reckless disregard for the odds against them. For every battle we won, they adapted, their ships becoming more resilient, their strategies more unpredictable. Where we relied on the perfection of our systems, on the precision of our calculations, they embraced chaos, finding opportunity in the most desperate of circumstances. At first, we believed their successes to be mere flukes, the random luck of a species unfamiliar with the rules of war, but as the conflict dragged on, we began to realize that there was something more at play. The humans were learning faster than we could have ever anticipated, and with each passing engagement, the balance of power shifted ever so slightly in their favor. The turning point came at the Battle of Zenith Prime, a key VARI stronghold on the edge of our territory. We had fortified it for decades, believing it to be impenetrable, a testament to the ingenuity and might of our engineers. Yet, the humans had launched a series of feints and misdirections, drawing our forces out of position and exploiting weaknesses we had long overlooked. Their victory there sent shockwaves through our ranks, and for the first time, we realized that this war would not be won with overwhelming force alone. The humans were not like the other species we had subjugated or defeated. They were relentless, and driven by something we could not understand. While we fought for control, for the preservation of our empire, they fought for something far more primal: survival. It was this drive that ultimately proved to be our undoing. As the war ground on, the humans deployed new technologies reverse-engineered from their defeats, honed through their losses that began to match our own. Their ships, once outmatched in every engagement, now moved with a precision that rivaled our own. Their weapons, once primitive and ineffective, now tore through our shields and armor with alarming efficiency. Each loss we suffered was a lesson for them, and each victory they claimed emboldened them further. We had underestimated them, not just as a fighting force, but as a species capable of harnessing the very chaos that we had sought to control. The final days of the war were marked by desperation on both sides. For the VARI, it was a struggle to maintain the facade of dominance, even as the cracks in our empire began to widen. For the humans, it was a push toward a victory that seemed inevitable yet just out of reach. On Tarnax 4, the heart of our empire, we gathered the last remnants of our fleet, believing that if we could hold this final line, we could force the humans into a stalemate, a negotiated peace that would allow us to retain some semblance of our former glory. But the humans had no interest in negotiations. They came with everything they had, their fleet a black swarm against the purple skies of our homeworld. The battle was fierce, the destruction unimaginable, but in the end, their numbers, their tactics, and their sheer determination overwhelmed us. As their ships descended into our atmosphere, breaking through our final defenses, we knew the end had come. The High Chancellor, a figure who had once commanded the respect and fear of the galaxy, now stood in the shattered remains of our war room, his once golden robes stained with the soot and debris of a dying empire. His hands trembled as he activated the transmission that would mark the first time in VRI history that we had surrendered to another species. The words, when they came, were quiet, almost lost amidst the static of the failing communication systems. We surrender to the Terran forces. The VRI Imperium is no more. Outside, in the ruined streets of the capital, the VRI people watched in silence as the human shuttles landed, their soldiers disembarking with a grim efficiency. There were no cheers, no displays of triumph, only the cold, methodical precision of a species that had fought its way to victory through sheer willpower and sacrifice. As their leader, Admiral Jane Davis, stepped forward to accept the formal surrender, there was no gloating in her expression, no sense of superiority. She, like her soldiers, bore the weight of the war in every line of her face, in the weariness of her movements. "This war is over," she said simply, her voice carrying across the battered city, her words final and absolute. And with that, the era of VARI dominance came to an end. In the days and weeks that followed, the humans established their control over Tarnax 4, but they did not come as conquerors, at least not in the way we had expected. There were no mass executions, no wholesale destruction of our culture. Instead, they implemented strict but measured policies, ensuring that we could no longer pose a threat while allowing us the chance to rebuild under their watchful eye. For many VARI, this was the ultimate humiliation to be ruled by a species we had once dismissed as inferior, but for others, it was an opportunity. As the initial shock of defeat began to fade, a strange sort of peace settled over the planet. The humans, for all their power, were not the monsters we had imagined. They did not seek to annihilate us, but to integrate us into their growing sphere of influence. In time, some VRI even began to work alongside them, learning from their ways, adapting to the new reality. But for those of us who had lived through the height of the VRI Imperium, the surrender marked the end of everything we had known. The empire, once vast and unassailable, had been reduced to a memory, a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and the folly of underestimating an enemy. As I stood on the observation deck of what had once been our greatest spaceport, now repurposed by the humans for their own use, I looked out at the stars and wondered how we had come to this. How had a species that we had once considered beneath us managed to bring us to our knees? The answer, I realized, lay not in their technology or their tactics, but in something far deeper. The humans, for all their flaws, possessed a resilience that we had never understood. They were willing to endure unimaginable hardships, to sacrifice everything for the sake of survival. And in the end, that had been enough. The VARI, for all our superiority, had grown complacent, relying on our technology and our history of dominance to protect us from threats we could not see. The humans had no such illusions. They had fought every step of the way, clawing their way to victory through the ashes of their failures. And now, as they stood victorious on the ruins of our world, I could not help but feel a strange sense of admiration for them. They had earned their place among the stars, not through conquest or brutality, but through sheer determination. And in that moment, I realized that perhaps, just perhaps, there was something we could learn from them. The surrender of the VARI Imperium was not just the end of an era, it was the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the galaxy. A chapter where humans, once the underdogs, now stood as equals, if not rulers, in a galaxy that had long ignored them. As I turned away from the stars and began the long walk back to what was left of my home, I knew that the future would be uncertain, but one thing was clear: the VRI had been humbled, and the galaxy would never be the same again.